In 2007, the perpetual sophomore Maverick T Mustang was revealed to Midwestern State University during homecoming as its new official mascot. His unveiling came after a year of work by committees, marketing teams, and the faculty to meet the demands of the NCAA. For 83 years, the students of Midwestern State University were known as the Indians, and now alumni, the student body, and the local community members were in an uproar over the demands the NCAA made. Viewed as an overreach by the NCAA, un-Texan-like to yield to the demands, and facing a possible backlash during a downturn when the university was struggling to bring students in, it faced the prospect of becoming a significant controversy that could cause continued issues for the school. However, there is more than meets the eye to this story. This is not just a story of a big entity exerting control over a North Texas school to change what some viewed as a problematic name, nor is it a story about an underdog university fighting to keep its name. We'll be speaking with three people who were at Midwestern State University during the change: Dr. Keith Lamb, Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Affairs, who was head of the committee responsible for finding the new mascot name; Dr. Jim Serrano, Professor and Chair of the Mass Communications Department, who teaches ethics and law courses relating to mass communication, as well as being present during the change of the mascot; and James Moore, a local member of the Choctaw Nation and MSU alumni with a multi-generational history with MSU from before the name change. Welcome to The Brutal Truth. My name is Michael, and I'll be your host as we dive into the history of MSU and the controversies that supposedly surround the campus. But before we start this episode in its entirety, we have some potentially offensive language. While I would love to avoid it, sometimes when discussing a sensitive topic or discussing history, you simply can't. In 2005, the NCAA came down with a directive that 18 universities around the United States had to change their mascots because they were deemed problematic due to their mascots or school nicknames. Many of the schools on that list use either Indians or other racially insensitive terms considered derogatory towards the indigenous peoples. These terms included the Redskins, the Braves, the Redmen, the Chiefs. When the announcement of the planned name change was unveiled, there was a mixed reaction across Wichita Falls area.
I was surprised, number one. I didn't think it would ever change.
Yeah, and so the students weren't real happy about that, clearly, right? I mean, this was part of their identity. Our nickname was the Indians.
There were students who said, "I don't care about this. I'm broke. I'm tired. I don't care about this." There were other students who said, "This is important because it represents the university."
Alumni and students from Midwestern had mixed reactions. Some were mad and wanted to fight the change no matter what. Some accepted it and continued focusing on their studies, while others were upset because it was a part of their college identity. The changes rolled out quickly and at almost fevered pace to complete the change. Some viewed President Rogers as simply rolling over to the NCAA despite his commentary about accepting the change as being un-Texan-like. However, Dr. Lamb shed some light on this during our interview and explained why the university didn't appeal or fight the NCAA's directive to change the name.
So what the NCAA told me is that they consider the word Indian itself the name of a culture or a race, okay? No different than being called the African Americans or the Hispanics or the Caucasians. The NCAA would be fine with a tribal, and that is what they told me. So they said Indians is off the table. They said if Florida State's keeping theirs because it's the tribal name.
Looking back nearly 20 years later, Dr. Lamb admitted that it could have been handled better in some ways.
Retrospectively, we should have involved the campus community in the decision whether we appeal or not. Maybe not the decision, but at least get their input so we can make a decision with their input. I think that's something we should have done.
Dr. Serrano mentioned that some people on campus felt as if their voice wasn't going to be heard no matter what, and this small change mentioned by Dr. Lamb could have gone a long way to address that feeling.
We could hold a protest in the middle of Bowl and Fountain, and administration would say, "Oh, those cute students, okay." And there were many students, I think they were convinced that some guys in suits in Hardin behind closed doors would just decide.
When looking at the process of the change, it was something that was handled with markability in mind. While Midwestern is a public university, we still do have to draw students here. A mixed opinion exists regarding mascots in schools. Personally, I don't care what my mascot is. I'm here to learn. And this is a sentiment that Dr. Serrano echoed.
And when a student looks at this school, they think, well, do they have the major I want? Can I work with these faculty? Will I make friends at this school? Can I live in this kind of housing? Will the curriculum be too hard, too easy? can I afford it? They're not asking, well, are we the Indians or are we the Tornadoes?
And while that may be our opinions on the mascot, Dr. Lamb brings up an excellent point regarding the mascot and the legacy of your time as a college student, especially when I broach the subject of tribal names that are still used for street names in boardrooms on campus.
We wanted to, as an institution, or at least as a cabinet, wanted to make sure we still gave that nod to the past, right? So we still have the Sunwatcher statue, beautiful work over here in Sunwatcher Plaza. The one that could be revisited are street names. Some of those seem to, certainly there's some tribal ones such as Comanche. But we used to have some that I would have preferred us not have. We used to have a TP drive on campus. That's now this promenade. Actually, the Jesse Rogers Promenade was TP Drive for a number of years.
James Moore, a local member of the Choctaw Nation, had this to say when he noticed the street names didn't change after Midwestern changed their mascot.
I noticed that, and I thought to myself, if they were going to do a change, why wouldn't they do it across the board?
Speaking with James, he agreed that keeping the names is what's needed currently. It helps to keep that branch to the past while we move forward to finding our new future.
Preferred that they keep the name. Things do change for the good or not so good. And sometimes the new ages want to leave out history as part of the learning or education process.
In the end, Midwestern State University has come to strike a balance with its students. We have generations of alumni, faculty, and students who have known themselves as Indians and Mustangs. Throughout the research for this episode, I have found things that have surprised me and produced moments of deep thought and reflection. But one thing has stayed true through all the people and all the research. The school's legacy is important to everyone, and while we might not all agree on the best name for the school's mascot, the main focus has always been the students and ensuring they succeed, whether they're the MSU Indians or the MSU Mustangs.
20, 30, 40, 100 years out. I hope students look back on their time here and feel that we did our jobs. We challenged them, we supported them. Part of our calling card here is how we're invested in the student, right? I like to think, and what I tell parents and stuff is we form authentic relationships with our students. We know our students, we're invested in their success, we're invested in their future.
At first, this seemed very cut and dry, a case of the university leadership bowing to pressure from an outside entity. But that wasn't the case. Mistakes were made, yes, but it's easy for us to look back 20 years later and pick it apart, saying you should have done X better. In the digital world where creators have seconds to grab a person's attention and keep it, the ability for clips to lose their essential context is common, something even I myself have fallen victim to. The skills being taught across campus by our professors are crucial for us to look back and address the legacy of our school. As a university, we strove to become a better, more inclusive place where all our students can feel welcome. While it may have been done at the directive of the NCAA, they thought they were speaking for those who couldn't have a voice. To understand that while yes, we were the MSU Indians for almost 100 years, it was a legacy steeped in cultural appropriation and derogatory actions, and that there was a better way for us to honor the connections we had with our local indigenous tribes. MSU has a long and storied legacy full of groundbreaking history and controversy for both good and bad. We were a leader in the effort to desegregate when other universities were still fighting to keep segregation. It shows the good does not outshine the bad, and the bad does not outshine the good. It's part of our legacy. It's part of our history. One simply has to look for it. Next time on The Brutal Truth, we'll dive into the history of desegregation at Midwestern State University, showing that our legacy is so much more than what we think it is here. I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to James Moore, Dr. Lamb, and Dr. Serrano for taking the time out of their busy schedules to sit and talk with me about the events from 20 years ago. I'd also like to thank the editor for the Times Record News, Claire Kowalczyk, for the help she provided in gaining access to the archives. I also want to thank my source within MSU who did not want to be identified for their assistance with their research. Finally, I'd like to thank SoundCue for the use of their music database and the music in this episode.